There once was a cop named Kim. He wore a bomber, orange and slim. His vision was bad, and I made him mad, but I'd still take a bullet for him. Hey guys, James here again, and today I want to talk about Disco Elysium by Zaum? I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that, actually. Disco Elysium is a role-playing game where you play as a cop trying to solve a murder case in a dilapidated city. Normally, I would compare this game to other games, but I don't really have a direct game comparison this time. To me, Disco Elysium is part point-and-click adventure and part visual novel, while implementing mechanics of tabletop games like Dungeons & Dragons, using dice to perform skill checks as you talk to different townsfolk, and go through various trials. Overall, I actually enjoyed Disco Elysium quite a bit, as I really enjoyed the characters in different moments, but considering the somewhat slow pace and amount of reading you might need to do, I don't think it's necessarily a game for everyone. Also, before I get into the review, just a warning. Disco Elysium is a very story-based game, and as such, I might reveal very minor plot points to help set up the situation you find yourself in, but I won't be spoiling any actual story beats. Now, let's dive into this. So, before starting the story, you first get to set your base skills. These are broken into 4 major categories: intellect, psyche, physique, and motorics. These categories are further broken down into individual skills, which I might also refer to as senses or instincts throughout this review. These specific skills are the stats which are taken into consideration for the skill checks you'll come across throughout the entire game, determining your ability to succeed in performing the actions you might attempt to make. The game starts and you find that you're a cop who wakes up in a hostel one day, having completely lost his memory. It's unclear who exactly you are and what exactly you're doing, but this gives you a blank slate to roleplay the kind of cop you want to be. A lot of the fun of the game comes from the roleplaying, so you get to determine if you want to be a good cop, a corrupt cop, or maybe a terrible drunk and drug-addicted hobo cop who clamors of the impending apocalypse. Early on, you meet your partner and then begin to investigate the case. Your case is one around a man who was hanged from a tree behind the hostel you're staying at in what appears to be a lynching. On the surface, the case seems like quite a simple one, but as you continue to investigate, you find that things aren't quite what they seem. As you conduct your investigation, you'll go around the district of Martinez, checking out points of interest and speaking with the various townsfolk to see what they know. When engaging with characters, you're given dialogue trees you go through in order to talk to them and learn more about the world around you. As you interact with people and objects, you'll come across various skill checks which are broken down into 2 types. First, there are basic checks, which are checks purely against the stat in question. Basically, if you have enough of a specific stat, you pass, and if you don't, you fail. These usually come up in situations where your character is assessing situations. Depending on your stats, your character might react differently to what's happening. Passing or failing these checks will usually result in your instinct or inner voice chiming in with your character's thoughts on the current situation. I found this mechanic to be quite interesting in a meta way, as oftentimes you'll find yourself failing some checks, and your inner voice might give you useless or bad information. As such, you need to determine, do you want to act based on this bad information, or will you defy your own instincts? I will say though, given the fact that your character loses his memory, I did find the ability to dig up some obscure knowledge to be a bit questionable, but I'll give it a pass. The second type of checks are roll checks. Roll checks essentially differ in that you need to perform dice rolls in order to determine whether or not you succeed in the action you attempted. These checks tend to occur when your character needs to take an active action, for example, like trying to convince other people to give you information, or physical actions like shooting at targets and breaking down doors. Your chance of success is affected by your stats, but ultimately the dice roll determines the actual outcome, so sometimes you can get really lucky or unlucky. While there are some rolls you can only perform once, the majority of rolls in the game can be performed again if you level up the corresponding stat. That way, the game encourages you to continue to explore and talk to people before you can reattempt old checks. Another role-playing mechanic is called thoughts. Thoughts will come up depending on how you play your character, or if you come across certain scenarios. When you engage in a thought, you go through different prompts which allow you to begin researching said thought. These thoughts can be things like thinking you're some sort of superstar cop, or maybe thoughts around personal ideology. Researching a thought takes a specified amount of time and will often have a temporary stat debuff, but once fully researched, they provide some sort of bonus. Some of these can be really good, while some others feel a bit more useless, but might have some funny side effects and change how your character sees and approaches things. As you interact with the people in the world around you, you gain experience points which will allow you to either level up your stats, or give you more space to equip thoughts. Throughout the game, you can also obtain various items and clothing. The items will have varying effects, with some being key items to investigate and interact with, and some others being items you can equip to perform certain tasks. There are also drugs and alcohol you can use in order to give your character stat boosts. Meanwhile, the clothing system was interesting in that wearing different clothing would have different stat changes on your skills, some of them being negative. I do have a minor nitpick here though, where it would be a tad annoying to have to exit out of a dialogue tree or interaction in order to properly equip relevant items or clothing. If it's already in my inventory, I don't really see the point of having to open it up and equip it on my left or right hand. It's a minor inconvenience, but an inconvenience nonetheless. Outside of that though, there isn't really too much else to the gameplay. A lot of the quests will have you running between areas and are often just about finding things and succeeding in skill checks. Because of this, I can see some people not really enjoying the actual gameplay of the game, but the real draw of the game is the role-playing and story. So given the focus on story in Disco Elysium, it's one of the things I really wanted to address. For me, I enjoyed the characters a lot, as well as a lot of the different moments in the game. The game also has a lot of interesting ideas which are brought up, but I did find it to be a bit of a mixed bag at times. Again, given the almost visual novel nature of the game, I do feel like your enjoyment of the game might come a lot from how much you enjoy literature and the writing. I think that the game does a pretty good job at world building. Since your character has completely lost his memory, it gives you the opportunity to ask questions which are seemingly common knowledge to others in the world, thus giving you as the player a chance to learn about the history of the world you're in. The main issue with the world building is that it just takes some dedication to really remember and understand. Just like reading any novel in a fictional world, it'll take some time to understand the unique geography, cultures, and concepts that exist in the world, and when first starting out, it can actually be a bit confusing reading all these new terms that are being thrown out. I found the characters to be the strongest part of the game. Each character feels very distinct and recognizable, and in particular, I really like your partner, Kim. Everyone has their own personality, and I think performances are pretty good across the board. At times, I did find the writing a bit dense, but this might be more of an indictment on my reading ability than anything else. I didn't always understand everything that was being said at times, and there were even points in the game which sort of acknowledge this too, as even your character will sometimes be very confused. You might want to have a dictionary ready on the side, just in case. Despite this, I do think there are some really well-written passages. Hearing your inner thoughts reads a lot like a novel in how characters will observe the world around them. And of course, I have to admire the sheer number of dialogue choices, especially considering that various skill checks, interactions, and thoughts may change what becomes available. I also like how they tackle the concept of Chekhov's gun in the game. There are quite a few interactions and side quests which are seemingly random, but you'll find yourself grinning when you see previous interactions come back down the line and pay off. This really rewards players for exploring and engaging with everything that they can find. There are some pretty great moments, and I found myself laughing a lot more than I originally anticipated. There's plenty of drama too, and there may even be moments which make you cry. It's a bit slow at first, but I thought the middle leading up to the climax was quite strong. However, I will say I was a bit disappointed in the final act, as I felt it wasn't quite as strong as the previous ones. And I think this is largely because the story does eventually need to bring you down the ending path, so you lose a bit of the freedom you had before. Something to note is that your choices in the game might not necessarily affect the broad strokes of the story, but they can greatly change how different situations might play out. Overall though, I did really enjoy the story, and I think there are some very human moments. The game is an exploration in philosophy and human nature. It brings up the ideologies of communism, fascism, moralism, and liberalism, potentially critiquing each through your character, depending on the responses you choose. It also takes a look at other human concepts like racism and what it really means to be human and alive, diving into ideas of existentialism, nihilism, and absurdism. They even get a bit meta with the whole idea of the stat check, which I enjoyed as someone who likes to look at games. One area of disappointment I had though was around some of the scenes and animations. While there is narration in the final cut, oftentimes it's your job as the reader to really use your imagination. Usually you'll only see the portrait of a person you're interacting with, and there are occasionally small animations from the character models, but otherwise, scenes aren't really animated or drawn out. I do wish that they had animated some of these a bit more, but given the influence of tabletop RPGs on the game, I can understand why it's not the case. Graphically, Disco Elysium sports this sort of stylistic and moody watercolor paint-based style. I do think it's a unique look and cool aesthetic, but personally, I didn't find the graphics of the game to be particularly beautiful. I did like a lot of the art stills and character portraits though, but I found it a bit odd how some of the character models didn't really seem to reflect the portraits they showed. I did run into some visual bugs, and one thing which was a bit weird for me was how jarring time of day and weather changes would be. The graphics are by no means bad, and perhaps part of it is just the fact that they need to portray ghettos, so naturally, the environments might seem more run down and dark. From an audio perspective, I think it's solid all around. I found the narration and voice work was pretty well done, although there are some readings which can feel a bit off at times. I also noticed a few errors in voice lines, sometimes reading a completely different line than what was written, but given the sheer amount of text to go through, I think I can give that a pass. The music was a mixed bag for me personally. I thought there were some really great tracks, but some songs can be a tad annoying, especially when you need to hear them over and over again, revisiting the same areas and performing those skill checks and quests. Other than that, I had a few small nitpicks. For one thing, I felt like there were quite a few loading screens, even when just going through different rooms of the same building. I can understand why this is the case given that your situation in the game might be different and thus require different objects to be loaded, but again, just a minor annoyance. My other nitpick is that I felt like there were some missed opportunities in the game. In particular, I thought they really should have had an end of day debrief with your partner every day, especially after they made it a thing the first night, only for it to never happen again. Overall though, while I sound a bit critical of the game, I did actually really enjoy it. I really liked the characters and there were some absolutely great moments. Sure, the game's not perfect, but it was quite relaxing and I did find myself looking forward to playing it every night. Playing it feels a lot like finding a new novel to read, but again, given the nature of the game, I don't think I can recommend it for everyone. It takes around 20 to 40 hours to beat, with some additional replayability if you want to see how different scenarios and role-playing might change. If you like literature or want to see a pretty unique take on RPGs, then I think you should give it a shot. But is it worth the $40 price tag? Personally, I'd say yes, but I also wouldn't blame someone for wanting to wait for it to drop closer to maybe around $20 to $30. But hey, that's just me. Feel free to let me know down below what you think. Have you tried Disco Elysium and what did you think of it? And if you made it this far, I just wanted to say I appreciate you checking out this video. If you enjoyed it, please do consider hitting that like or subscribe button as it really helps my channel and motivates me to make more and better videos. And as usual, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Peace.